Hello, my dear Louisians. Dun sa first na YouTube video is based on the modules, but now this YouTube presentation is a PDF. So, virtue ethics. It's an ethics that has its paradigms, the virtues. So, Aristotle is interested in what is good for humans. No? Kung what is good, ano nakakabuti, and how we ought to live. In his virtue ethics, Aristotle believed In his virtue ethics, Aristotle believed in the excellence of philosophical contemplation and virtuous actions stemming from virtuous persons. That is, virtuous actions are what the person with wisdom will choose because what is good is obvious to such a person. In terms of the material world, Aristotle believed that organisms continually move from imperfect to perfect states in a teleological development. Ang ibig sabihin po ng teleological is the end. Telos means the end, no? The perfect being innate within the imperfect. For example, a seed, no, ang teleos niya, ang parang finality niya is becomes a plant. Ang embryo becomes a baby, which becomes an adult. So it always for the teleological development. In this way, Aristotle believed that the essential nature of things lay not at their cause sa beginning, but at their end, telos. No? The telos. So, yun po. We study ethics in order to improve our lives, and therefore its principal concern is the nature of human well-being. Aristotle follows Socrates and Plato in taking the virtues to be central to a well-lived life. What we need in order to live well is a proper appreciation of the way in which such goods as friendship, pleasure, virtue, honor, and wealth fit together as a whole. In order to apply the general understanding to particular cases, we must acquire through proper upbringing and habits the ability to see, on its occasion, which course of action is best supported by reasons. Therefore, practical wisdom, as he conceives it, cannot be acquired solely by learning general rules. No? So, napaka-importante ang action. Hindi, that's not enough yung you learn the general rules. For the things we have to learn, Aristotle said, before we can do them, we learn by doing them. No? For example, how can you learn how to play the keyboard? No? You know already all the rules, but you have to learn by doing them. Like for example, the lawn tennis, I watch a lot of YouTube videos, but I learned them by doing the tennis, and also basketball. Okay, so we must also acquire through practice those deliberative, emotional, and social skills that enable us to put our general understanding of well-being into practice in ways that are suitable to its occasion. The human good and the function argument. Ethics for Aristotle is not theoretical discipline. We're asking what the good for human beings is not simply because we want to have knowledge, but because we will be better able to achieve our good if we develop a fuller understanding of what it is to flourish. In raising this question, what is the good? He claimed that some goods better than others. The difficult and controversial question arises when we ask whether certain of these goods are more desirable than others. Aristotle's search for the good is a search for the highest good. Aristotle begins the Nicomachean Ethics considering all the disagreement among us about what is best of all the goods, pleasure, honor, love, wealth, fame, glory, etc. He uses a distinction between instrumental and intrinsic goods to find the best, highest good. So I repeat, Aristotle uses a distinction between instrumental and intrinsic goods to find the best, highest good. He assumes that the highest good, whatever it turns out to be, has three characteristics. First, it is desirable for itself. Second, it's not desirable for the sake of some other good. And number three, all other goods are desirable for its sake. Instrumental and intrinsic good. Instrumental good, something good as a means to something else. Yan ang instrumental good. Having money, good for getting a date. Having a date, good for falling in love. Being in love, good for its own sake. So yan yung intrinsically good. And happiness as a means to, and for happiness as a means to happiness. Being happy, good for its own sake. So yan ang highest good. It seems that happiness is not desired for anything other than itself. It's intrinsically desirable, but not instrumentally so. Honor, good for its own sake, but also a means to happiness. Fame, good for its own sake, but also a means to happiness. Happiness then seems to be the highest good for humans. We desire it for its own sake, but never seemingly for anything else. It seems self-sufficient. So sa human nature, the instrumental intrinsic good distinction leads us to conclude the good for humans is happiness. There's, however, another method for identifying the good of something that Aristotle employs. He says that the good of a thing is its unique function. The good of the eye is seeing, and it's a good eye if it sees well. The good of a pen is writing, and it's a good pen if it writes well. Aristotle then asks, what is the good of human beings? The good of a human is reason, and it's a good human if it reasons well. Humans are rational animals. Common definition of humans in ancient Greece. So what is the definition of happiness? We have seen that the good is happiness, most desired, and the good is reasoning well by analogical argument. Aristotle produces his definition of happiness from these two lines of reasoning. Since happiness and reasoning well must be the same somehow, happiness, therefore, is reasoning well. In Aristotle's own words, happiness is an activity of the soul, reasoning, in conformity with virtue, that is reasoning well. So happiness is not a feeling, happiness is not a condition or state of mind, happiness is not desire, satisfaction, getting what you want, happiness is not something you can receive. Okay? So, virtue towards happiness. In Book 1, Chapter 13 of the Nicomachean Ethics, Aristotle says, since happiness is an activity of the soul, in accordance with perfect virtue, we must consider the nature of virtue. Aristotle says that to understand happiness, we must understand virtue. Doing something well or with excellence is one of the definition of a virtue. Things are said to have virtue when they perform the function proper to them well. The function that is proper to a thing is called its work. Screwdrivers drive screws. That is their work, or loosely speaking, their virtue. Also, a thing's work is what only it can do or what nothing else can do so well. So, intellectual virtues. For humans, this work is reason. We are rational animals. So, what we are good at as humans is our reason, composed of theoretical wisdom, Sophia, scientific reasoning like episteme, Greek scientia, in Latin. Yun, no, ang scientific reasoning. Intuitive understanding is nous. Practical wisdom, practical reason. Prudence is pronosis. Craft, knowledge, skill, art is techne. Another is moral virtues. Aristotle identifies 11 moral virtues, all governed by one intellectual virtue called prudence or good deliberation. So these are courage, temperance, generosity, magnificence, ibig sabihin generosity with wealth, magnanimity, proper pride, right ambition, good temper, friendliness, truthfulness, wit, and justice. All except justice are a mean between extremes. The anatomy of a moral virtue: cowardliness, courage, no, rashness. Courage is the mean between being a coward and being rash. A popular example: when running into battle, the coward lags behind and the brash or rash person runs ahead. The courageous person keeps with his or her mates. Prudence is the intellectual virtue that finds the mean, tells us that being courageous is more like being rash than it's like being cowardly. In fact, all the virtues depend on prudence for their existence. We could not discover the moral virtues without skillful deliberation. For moral virtue, reason must rule. If a person is courageous or temperate by nature, they have moral virtue, but not in a strict sense. Being morally virtuous requires submitting one's feelings and actions to reason. How are moral virtues acquired? Virtues are attained or acquired by practice and habit. We become just by doing just acts, generous by generous acts, temperate by temperate acts, etc. So if virtues are attained by practice and habit, we must do just acts to become just, and friendly acts to become friendly, etc. How do we know what acts are just or friendly in the first place? We learn by observation, we ask a virtuous person, we use prudence to find the mean or the right amount of an action, the right time for an action, the right object, immediate and or distant object for an action, the right manner of acting, etc. Dispositions, not habits. Moral virtues are not habits. They are dispositions to act that are acquired by habituation. So it's not just merely habits ang virtues. It's a disposition na acquired by habituation. Purposive dispositions lying in a mean determined by reason. To possess a virtue is to hold a complex mental framework of the right feelings, attitudes, understanding, insight, experience, etc. To have a multi-track disposition, unlike a simple habit, such as being a tea drinker or coffee drinker. Multi-track dispositions take truthfulness. A truthful person tells the truth, but not indiscreetly. Raises kids to do so, encourages others to do so, doesn't find jokes about dishonesty funny, is surprised and saddened by dishonesty in friends, doesn't provide the truth to those intending to misuse it, cares about truth for its own sake, values it above personal feelings, say, etc. To sum up, moral virtue. A morally virtuous person then ideally has all 11 moral virtues. Each virtue is established by practice and habit, subjecting feelings and actions to reason. Each virtue is settled between excess and deficiency by comprehensive understanding or multi-track assessment. Kaya ang virtue ay mean. No? Ibig sabihin, hindi siya deficient at hindi siya excessive. Sakto lang. No? Moral virtue towards eudaimonia. The terms eudaimonia means happiness and euzen is living well, designates such an end. The Greek term eudaimon is composed of two parts. Eu means well and daimon means divinity or spirit. To be eudaimon is therefore to be living in a way that is well favored by a god. He regards eudaimon as a mere substitute for euzen, living well. It allows us to achieve what's known as eudaimonia, a Greek word that means a life well lived, or translated also as human flourishing. And a life of eudaimonia is a life of striving. It's a life of pushing yourself to your limits and finding success. A eudaimonistic life will be full of happiness that comes from achieving something really difficult rather than just having it handed to you. Eudaimonia is a fulfilled accomplishment and satisfaction through hard work. No one tries to live well for the sake of some further goal. Rather, being eudaimon is the highest end, and all subordinate goals, health, wealth, and other such resources are sought because they promote well-being, not because they are what well-being consists in. But unless we can determine which good or goods happiness consists in, it is of little use to acknowledge that it is the highest end. To resolve this issue, Aristotle asks what the ergon, function, task, or work of a human being is, and argues that it consists in activity of the rational part of the soul in accordance with virtue. So, the good of a human being must have something to do with being human. And what sets humanity off from other species, giving us the potential to live a better life, is our capacity to guide ourselves by using reason. If we use reason well, we live well as human beings. Or to be more precise, using reason well over the course of a full life is what happiness consists in. Doing anything well requires virtue or excellence, and therefore living well consists in activities caused by the rational soul in accordance with virtue or excellence. The word virtue comes from the Greek word arete, which could be translated in English as excellence. Someone has arete if he or she performs well with the intellectual and moral virtues. Aristotle defines moral virtue as a disposition to behave in the right manner and as a mean between extremes of deficiency and excess, which are vices. We learn moral virtue primarily through habit and practice rather than through reasoning and instruction. So yun mong katotohanan, ang moral virtues, yung 11 na moral virtues ni Aristotle, ay matutunan lang ninyo yan, not so much with reasoning and instruction, but by habit and practice, or what we call the reasoned disposition. According to Aristotle, the virtuous habit of action is always an intermediate state between the opposed vices of excess and deficiency. Too much and too little are always wrong. The right kind of action always lies in the mean. Aristotle reasoned that if we can just focus on being good people, the right actions will follow effortlessly. Meaning, become a good person and you do good thing. There is no book needed. But why you should become a virtuous person? It is because of eudaimonia. This is morality for Aristotle, being the best person you could ever be and honing your strength while working on your weaknesses. And for Aristotle, the kind of person who lives like this is a kind of person who will do good things. So thank you for listening. This is a YouTube video presentation of the PTF prepared by the ethics professors. So there are two videos here. The first video is more of the module, but this video has also a vantage point, no? Kahit na very short siya, pero andito dito yung mga substantial points na kailangan. So you can use either or both para mas matutunan ninyo ang subject na ito. So see you again on my next YouTube video. Bye-bye.